Alrighty. Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's my privilege to call the regular board meeting of November 17th of 2022 of the Edmonton Metropolitan Transit Services Commission to order at 3:02. And in person here, we have Councillor Gordon Harris, Councillor Ben Gromberg, Councillor Glenn Fidstad, and online we have Councillor Andrew Knack and Councillor Stuart Houston and Councillor Justin Laurie. And to be joined soon, we will have Councillor Sam Malkoff-Swain. So the just as a note to everybody, the reminder that we are now recording this meeting and it is being live streamed on YouTube for public consumption. And so welcome to all who are watching online. Today's board meeting is a hybrid meeting, as I've stated, with some members and participated located physically here at the Commission's offices at 6th Street and Jasper Avenue in the city of Edmonton, and others participating from their respective homes or places of work for the duration of this recording. And again, welcome to all who are here and online. So, as we start every meeting, let me start off with our land acknowledgement. And it is on behalf of the board, we would like to acknowledge the traditional land on which we are gathered as Treaty 6 land. We would like to thank the diverse Indigenous peoples whose ancestors' footsteps have marked this territory for centuries, such as the Cree, Dene, Saulteaux, Nakota Sioux, and Blackfoot peoples. We also acknowledge this as the Métis homeland and the home of the largest concentration of Inuit south of the 60th parallel. It is a welcoming place, this Edmonton region, welcoming for all peoples who come from around the world to share the Edmonton metropolitan region as home. And with that, we have an agenda before us, and I would invite someone to make a motion. First off, before I do that, any comments on the agenda? Seeing none, then there is a motion to accept the agenda. If I could have someone make that motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'd be prepared to move that the board approve the September 17th, 2022 agenda as adopted and presented.
Thank you very much. And I'll call for the question, and in present, we'll raise our hands. And online, if you can use the raise hand function to indicate your vote, that would be great. So all in favor, please. Okay, and I'll take a look to see what's happening online. And that's approved unanimously. Thank you very much. And so we'll go on to the agenda. And now we have the consent agenda, and on the consent, as you can see on the screen, organizational board meetings of October 20th, the audit and finance committee meetings, and the regular HR and compensation committee meetings, the Q3 financial update. And if you go back there so I can read it, I'll read those last two. Okay, hang on. Okay, and the procurement summary report and the director's terms of office summary. All right, now we have a motion to approve the consent agenda. Anyone care to exempt anything for debate off that consent agenda? Seeing none, Councillor Finstad, if you'd like to make the motion.
Thank you. I move the consent agenda be approved as presented.
All right, thank you very much. I'll call the question. All in favor? And online? I see one, I see two, I see three, and that's passed unanimously. Thank you very much. All right, on to the next item on the agenda. To reconfirmation of the EMTSC committees and membership. And in accordance with both the respective Audit and Finance Committee and HR Compensation Committee terms of reference annually, they must be reaffirmed. So Mr. Jankowski, you want to walk us through this?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. In accordance with your governing documents, the reconfirmation of the members on each one of the standing committees, along with the reconfirmation of the chair and the vice chair, is required. In preparation for today's meeting, we did reach out to all members of the board, and what we've confirmed, as far as we can understand, is the continued interest on behalf of all of the members to sit on the respective committees. And therefore, what we've prepared is a motion for your consideration, draft motion for your consideration on the next slide, which simply reconfirms the existing membership and existing leadership or chairmanship, chairpersonship for the respective committees. According to the documents, this has to be done annually, and as such, we're bringing this forward for your consideration and appropriate action.
Thank you very much. My understanding is that each member of these committees has been contacted for their feedback. Fair
That's
enough. Councillor Laurie, as chair of the Audit and Finance Committee, would you care to make this motion?
Certainly can do. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll move that the board reconfirm the following EMTSC committee membership is willing and able to continue serving on the committee. For the Audit and Finance Committee, we have Councillor Justin Laurie as chair, Councillor Stuart Houston vice chair, Councillor Glenn Fidstead, and Councillor Ben Gronberg. For the HR and Compensation Committee, we have Councillor Gordon Harris as chair, Councillor Sam Munkoff Swain as the vice chair, Councillor Wes Broadhead, and Councillor Andrew Knack.
Thank you very much. Accept that motion. Any opening comments?
Nothing big, Mr. Chair. Just again, appreciate the opportunity personally to chair the Audit and Finance Committee. It's been a fantastic committee to be a part of, and I feel it does some great work that contributes to the board and to the corporation as a whole. So looking forward to continuing that for the next year.
Thank you very much. Councillor Harris is chair of the HR and Comp Committee. Care to make any comments?
No, I would echo Councillor Laurie's comments. It has been a good experience to have worked on this committee over the last year as we moved to set up this organization. A lot of work to do, and the conversations, I think, have been fruitful and constructive. And I look forward to continuing the discussions with our group.
Thank you very much. Well, both of you must have done okay, because none of your respective committee members wanted to bail. So congratulations to both of you for being reaffirmed as chairs, and for the vice chairs as well. Thank you very much. Councillor Laurie, anything to close?
No, nothing. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Fair enough. I'll call the question then. All in favor of the motion? Online, I count 1, 2, 3. And 4, welcome Councillor Munkoff Swain, appreciate that. So that's a unanimous. And on to our debt policy revision. Again, over to you, Mr. Jankowski.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Prior to us presenting the 2023 budget for your consideration, one of the key elements that has been identified through the preparation of that budget is a recommendation to extend the debt repayment or debt retirement period. Your governing documents right now stipulate through the debt management policy that the stand-up debt for creating the commission was originally envisioned to be retired over the first 4 years of operation of the commission. I will remind the board that many things have changed since the original preparation of the business case on which on which basis the 8 members elected to join this commission, and on the basis of which the original debt management policy and the original thinking around retirement of debt was created. Originally, through the identification in the business case of a very different opening day scenario, there was the expectation that the debt could be repaid, the stand-up debt could be repaid or retired over the first 4 years of operation. As we've discussed numerous times with the board over the course of the last year, many things have changed, putting us in a very different position with regards to the draft 2023 budget that you have been considering and the final copy of which we are bringing forward today. Prior to you being able to approve that budget, what we would submit is that there should be a revision to the debt management policy, and this is reflected in the budget that has been brought forward for your ultimate consideration and approval, and that original stand-up debt now be proposed to be repaid over the first 7 years of operation. The sequence of these is a little bit odd in that we are bringing this forward prior to consideration and approval of the budget. But the reality is that the budget itself couldn't be approved without this policy change being put in place. And thus you see the recommendation to approve the change to the debt management policy to retire that stand-up debt over the first 7 years. And on the very next slide, we've got a proposed motion for you to affect that proposed change.
All right, fair enough. Thank you, Mr. Jankowski. Open the floor to questions. Councillor Harris?
Given the fact that 2 of our members are backstopping this debt instrument, have we consulted with Edmonton and St. Albert relative to the extension of the term from 4 to 7 years? And if so, what was their response? I presume they were concurring to that change.
Well, I do know that St. Albert is okay with that. I did get notice from our CEO that
Okay.
that they had considered it. Now, Councillor Knack, did you hear anything from your administration as to whether or not they were okay with the extension of the debt retirement time frame?
I haven't. My guess is that they would have said something if they had been, but I also shouldn't make too much of an assumption on that. But usually I think that would happen if there was a concern.
Yeah, I only asked this question just obviously because there obviously is municipal concurrence to move forward on that initially. It's a rounding error for the city of Edmonton at best, less than a rounding error, so I can't imagine it has a material impact. But for us, I think it's really critical to allow us to move forward. So I think this is an appropriate motion to consider at this point.
Thank you, Ms. Shea Smith. Do you have a comment?
I don't have anything else to add. I'll just add, one of the big pieces of work that we have to accomplish in 2023 is asset management framework and a full examination of when assets would be transferring to the commission. Once the commission has assets, we will be able to secure our own debt. That conceivably could be over the next 7 years, but at this point in time, we don't really know. But I don't have anything specific to add from St. Albert or Edmonton, but we will be engaging in further discussions after the budget is approved.
Fair enough. Thank you.
If I may, Mr. Chair, the only other thing I will add is that in addition to the original, in addition to Ms. Shea Smith's comments, we do have the authority to take on debt ourselves. And as a result of that, one of the considerations is once we start receiving the requisitions in from the municipalities, those requisitions will actually constitute the funding and the revenues for the operation of this commission, and the formula that is used by the province in relation to our commission will also allow us to take on debt and to offset some of the debt security requirements in that way. While we haven't had discussions with the lending institutions around that, that additional degree of comfort in terms of the debt room that is afforded to us by provincial regulation will assist us in that regard as well.
Okay, fair enough. All right, any other questions before I ask for somebody to move this agenda item? Seeing no further questions, Councillor Houston?
Yeah, it'd be my pleasure to make that motion, Mr. Chair, that the board approve, I'd like to make a motion that the board approve the debt management policy B-5 3.1 to be amended to modify the repayment of startup operating costs from 4 years to 7 years.
Thank you very much, Councillor Houston. Certainly accept that motion. Any opening comments?
Yes, I just wanted to thank the commission and stuff for the adjustment. I know the original business case contemplated 4 years. And I think when we were around the table having some discussion about maybe extending the period of repayment to try to lessen the impact of member municipalities on the upfront costs, that this was bantered around. I know that I know, Mr. Chair, you had made a suggestion to repay it back over a 10-year period. And we were at 4 and it came back at 7. So I think that's, kind of a middle of the road that I think, and I really appreciate the fact that it did cut back on our debt repayment costs, recognizing it will cost us just a tad bit more to carry it for a little bit longer, but at the end of the day, just makes it a little bit more affordable for everybody. So I'm super supportive of this policy and, hope everybody else can get on board with it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Houston. Any other Councillor Finstad?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a note that should cash flows enable repayment at a sooner time frame, that we are quite open to do that. So that would be,
yeah.
I think the 7-year time frame was just to give us that extra level of security, not put too much pressure on our cash flow. So.
Yep, fair enough. Thank you. Any other member of the board wishing to comment? Okay, seeing none. Any closing comments, Councillor Houston?
No, not at this time. Thank you.
All right, in that case, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, and I count 4 hands in the chambers and 4 online. That carries unanimously. Thank you very much. So that debt management policy then is modified as per that motion. Moving along then to the big item on the agenda today, the 2023 operating capital budget and the 2024-2025 outlook. And this we turn over to you, Mr. Jankowski.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to members of the board. We're very happy to be presenting to you today the final recommended draft budget for 2023 and the outlook for 24 and 25. This has been the culmination of many, many months of work. The work has included not only the preparation of the budget, but all of the advance work that the board authorized and directed in relation to determining an opening day service plan, bringing that forward in reflection of changed circumstances amongst the 8 member municipalities, bringing forward that plan ultimately for not only the board's consideration, but also working with all the administrations of all of the municipalities and working through the numbers resulting from the draft or from the opening day service plan that was developed under the board's direction, and relating it to the bottom-up costing that the board directed that we carry out to really understand what the total costs of delivery of service for the first year of operations would constitute. That work has been, as I said, about 10 months in getting here. We presented the draft budget to the committee or to the board last month, as well as to the Audit and Finance Committee a couple of weeks ago. And we're very happy to report that the committee recommended, as you saw in the minutes from the committee, the presentation and the hopefully the budget for approval by the board today. As I said, this work has been exhaustive. It has included many, many people, not only here at the commission, but also in the administrations of all 8 municipalities. Many of the costs on which this budget is based are costs that we received through the collaborative work with your administrations, with the transit providers or transit overseers in each one of the 6 municipalities where transit is being delivered today. And the end product, and in particular, the cost allocations reflect many meetings and many discussions with your administrations. I want to voice my thanks to all the administrations, to the CAOs and all their teams in all the municipalities. There were some tricky negotiations, tricky discussions. It was hard work, both on our side and on their side, to get here. But through the spirit of collaboration and cooperation, we are now very happy and proud to be presenting to the board this budget for your approval. This budget reflects some of the discussions that we've had over the course of the last couple of weeks. It reflects the input that you've provided in earlier discussions to us. And I also want to thank Ms. Shea Smith, as well as the rest of the senior leadership team. Everybody played a key role here. Doughton in our finance team also was heavily involved in preparing this budget. And this is not my work. This is the work of many people in this that have been involved in this process. So thank you to all of them. At the end of the day, this budget represents the overall cost, as I said, for delivering integrated transit services to our 8 municipalities, starting in April or on April 30th of 2023. That the services reflect a focus on not only intermunicipal services and the creation or the delivery of a network of services, of which each one of our 8 members will be a partial owner. That network is no longer a disparate collection of individual routes that are owned by one agency, one of the 8 agency. This approach represents collective ownership by all 8 members of the network that is being proposed today. The budget also includes the delivery of local services in a number of our municipalities. Those local services, which are today delivered individually, will now be coordinated and will be integrated into an overall regional approach, leading down the road to cost savings as a result of that integration. This has been a long time coming. The original Capital Region Board identified this objective of integrating regional transit in 2008. And it's taken 14 years for us to get to this point where we are presenting this first financial plan, truly bottom-up costed plan, costed with the assistance of your municipalities for your consideration. We've had to pivot over the course of the last year to reflect some of the very real changes that have taken place since the original business plan was approved. There have been political, there have been financial and social changes and challenges that we've had to accept, that we've had to deal with, and that we've had to rebalance in terms of forming the opening day approach. The opening day approach that you see before you and that it forms the basis of this plan is very different than what was originally envisioned as a concept in the 2020 business case, both business cases. But this cumulative, this overall approach that we have now crafted and brought forward is a creative solution representing a reasonable and feasible opening day service plan, which integrates transit across our 8 member municipalities. Moving to slide 15, and all of this data is, all my slide data is either drawn directly from or based on the document that was also circulated, the budget document that reflects the 2 components that have been discussed in earlier discussions with the board. Those 2 components being both the costs as well as the funding portions or funding options that the board has considered. And this budget that we're bringing forward has an overall value of $29.1 million for 2023. That, as I said earlier, represents the total amount, the total cost of providing the services of an integrated approach starting on April 30th or May 1st. April 30th happens to fall on a Sunday, May 1st being a Monday in 2023. The $29.1 million includes the delivery of 13 intermunicipal bus routes, including new elements across the center of the geographic area across Edmonton, and it links some of the existing routes that are operating today with those new elements. As I stressed before, this results in the commission, in the 8 members of the municipalities, really each owning a portion of the overall whole. Every one of the members has a stake in the entire network going forward. The $29.1 million reflects an estimated $3.9 million to be recovered in fair and non-fair revenues. As I said earlier as well, that $3.9 million reflects much of the information that we obtained and were able to obtain from your municipalities. It also includes a very conservative estimate, a revenue to cost estimate for some of the new routes that are being proposed. Thus, the overall amount that will be funded from the requisitions from the 8 commission members results in $25.1 million total value. Just before we get to what that actually includes, we wanted to touch on a 2022 year-end forecast update. And just as the draft budget was presented to the Audit Finance Committee 2 weeks ago, so too was our latest forecast for the end of 2022. The bottom line for total operating expenses in 2022 is now forecast to be $3.2 million. And while that you don't see the draft budget that you approved last year for 2022, the draft budget was approximately $3.6 million. So at this point in time, through all of the judicious sort of oversight that the board has provided and our own vigilance in terms of keeping our costs down for 2022, recognizing that we continue to be solely debt financed for the stand-up period, we have now projected an overall $480,000 cost savings. We will call it savings, but $480,000 under expenditure from budget for 2022. Again, just as we did last year, I'll remind the board that while that is an underspend, given the fact that we are wholly debt financed for these 2 years, it really doesn't represent a savings from collected revenues. It represents an underspending that will minimize our debt to be taken on or reduce our overall debt to be taken on. Some of those costs will, we anticipate, be incurred in 2023 as we continue to stand up the corporation through the first 4 months, but some of them will be unspent funds as we move forward. So moving to the next slide, to slide 17 then, I want to highlight some of the key parts of what is in the 2023 budget. In your 2023 proposed budget, you'll see a number of elements, and I'll highlight some of them as I move through the next few slides. And Ms. Shea Smith, I think will add some answers should you have any questions. But I want to bring your eyes to a couple of the key things. $21.4 million is the amount that we have estimated using the bottom-up costing for transit service operations. So within that category, that is where the net cost of delivering the both the regional and the local services, these are the direct and indirect costs, are included or categorized. I will run through the other elements over the next few slides, but as you're going forward, you can see that by and large is the biggest category. Moving on, I've already spoken to the $3.9 million in revenue that has been included. I will flip to slide 19. The budget also includes approximately $3.6 million in wages and benefits. And there are two categories that I want to highlight, two categories of staff that I want to highlight. This $3.6 million includes a number of staff that are paid through the pooled commission costs. And those are the staff, largely the extension of the staff that you see in the room today. We've got an overall complement of 12 FTEs in 2022, and we're proposing 4.5 additional FTEs for 2023 to supplement the small core staff that we have here. Included in this $3.6 million are also the salaries for approximately 12 staff that are working in our municipalities today, delivering transit services, and whose costs have been included as indirect service costs in that overall service cost category for both regional or intermunicipal service as well as local service. We also have in the budget an amount of $300,000 to get us ready for and get our travelers properly informed with regards to the services that we will be delivering starting in May of next year. So in preparation for a major service undertaking such as this one, it's quite normal to undertake some engagement activities, meet with the travelers out in the various touch points, explain to travelers how their services might either change or be supplemented. And so we've got a fair, what we consider to be a modest amount for community engagement prior to and following opening day to allow our travelers to be able to be properly informed with regards to the services that we will now be providing in an integrated fashion. In the expenses categories, we've got a couple of larger categories. We've got a budget of approximately $1.3 million for professional and consulting services. And those consulting services are largely to deliver on the work plan elements that the board approved for 2023 at the organizational meeting in October. There were a number of key pieces of work that need to be undertaken to fulfill either the obligations in your current governing documents or to start building appropriate management frameworks to ensure long-term sustainability of this organization and to deliver proper services to our traveling public, to our riders. I won't go through these in detail, but happy to answer any questions that you might have on those. We also have a budget of approximately $1.1 million for materials and supplies, and those are largely the costs of continuing to operate this office along with the required tools and processes to support that. There is a cost in there for increased insurance costs that we anticipate in 2023 as we start to deliver operations or oversee direct delivery of operations. And there are a few other elements in that category as well. I should mention that we went into more detail on some of these categories in the last Audit and Finance Committee. And I think I can say fairly that the Audit and Finance Committee was comfortable with recommending these costs to the board. And moving on then to slide 21, this is really the bulk of it. The board has already approved an opening day service plan for intermunicipal services. I spoke a little bit earlier to the collective network that will be delivered using the integrated approach. This is the network that all 8 municipalities, all 8 partners in this commission will own collectively. And yes, while there are individual elements that serve either 1 or 2 municipalities, as there's connectivity between a municipality outside of Edmonton and coming into Edmonton, the reality is that we've now weave these together in an overall network plan. And in working with the Edmonton administration and the Edmonton Council, we've identified several key new elements crossing Edmonton, which complete that weave or that integrated network plan for opening day. The $13.9 million that we have identified includes for intermunicipal service includes 13 routes, which serve all 8 member municipalities. It also includes some modest amount of service to non-member municipalities, and I'll touch on that in a minute. Again, these regional route service recommendations have been developed using a balanced approach. And on the next slide, you will see a graph that you are or a table that you are familiar with by now. This is the representation of the cost allocation for each one of the route elements. I will highlight simply that there is one route that has been added on late in the game, and that is the very bottom one, what we're calling the Yeg Express. That is the direct route that has been the topic of some discussion between the airport and the downtown business area in the city of Edmonton. And that has been added, I understand, in discussions with both the administration and with Councillor Knack, that there is a wholly or a separate unfunded service package that is being brought forward for Edmonton Council's consideration in regards to the advancement of that route. I will highlight that early in the discussions, we've spoken with the board early in the discussions around a regional plan. We spoke with the board. We identified that element as being a potential future element in the near term to be undertaken or to be explored, but that it would be subject to a different sort of funding regime. And since that time, the city of Edmonton has started to consider that more directly, and thus we have added that onto our overall list of routes to be included in the opening day service plan. The costs for that have been included, and as you can see on this table, right now 100% of those costs are allocated, and the discussions will continue with the city of Edmonton in that regard. Moving from the regional service to local service, as we've indicated, there are a number of local services that are currently being operated, and certainly through the business case and through the original commitments that were entered into by all 8 member municipalities, the understanding was that the local services in all the municipalities except for the city of Edmonton would transition under the oversight of the EMTSC for opening day. In working with those agencies and working with those members that are currently operating those services, we have included a budget of $6.5 million. That is essentially the 8 months of costs for operating those local services at essentially the same service levels that exist today. And those costs have been included in this budget. 100% of those costs will be funded by those individual municipalities in accordance with the cost allocation discussions that were developed for service. There is one additional element that has also been discussed with the board that reflects recent discussions with one of our member municipalities. The city of St. Albert, in discussing the transition of delivery under the EMTSC oversight for 2023, the city of St. Albert administration identified a concern or a potential desire to also transition the oversight of paratransit services in reflection of the fact that much of that services is overseen today using the same resources and the same processes that are being used for the oversight of the local service in the city of St. Albert. So we've worked with St. Albert to identify the cost for 8 months worth of service. $809,000 for that prorated operating period from April 30th to the end of 2023. And we've included that in the budget, again, to be recovered at 100% from the city of St. Albert. And the reason why we're highlighting this here is that that is the only paratransit service that is included in the proposed budget in reflection of the exploration of that fact with the St. Albert administration. I mentioned a little bit earlier that there are 2 non-member municipalities that are included in our delivery projections or our plan for 2023. And there's service that is being proposed to both Leduc County and to Parkland County that really reflects existing operations or existing arrangements that exist between some of our members. In other words, between the city of Leduc and Leduc County, and between the city of Spruce Grove and Parkland County. And we have included the costs for continuing the existing, essentially with the existing agreements, or in the case of Spruce Grove and Parkland County, the agreement that both parties are expecting to enter into effective January 1st. And we've included in those costs to Leduc County and to Parkland County, and those have been the costs are reflective of the discussions that we have had with the senior administrative leaders in both of those counties for the delivery of services in both those areas. I will highlight one thing, that the city of Leduc and Leduc County have a very different type of joint venture agreement, and in our discussions with both city administration and county administration, there was a strong desire to keep that agreement in place. And so what we've included in the budget is the continuation of the existing services only under that existing agreement, with the understanding that the city of Leduc would also be responsible for its portion of the indirect costs associated with delivering the overall pooled services, and the city of Leduc would be responsible for its portion of the commission pooled costs, in addition to the costs of maintaining the joint venture agreement. So that is the understanding that we've had with both the county of Leduc and the city of Leduc, and we're moving forward and recommending a budget that reflects the ongoing reliance on that joint venture agreement. So that I'll move on from there and move on to the operations indirect service costs. Included in the overall amount for regional and local service is the allocation of indirect service costs. There's about $2 million that has been included in the overall 13 and 7.9, I think it was, for the local service in those amounts, though there is approximately $2 million in pooled indirect service costs. And again, we've worked with your administrations, the administrations in the member municipalities, to identify what those costs constitute. Some of those costs are specific to each municipality. Some of those costs are associated with let's say staff or resources that will now be used to deliver the collective amount of services. So we've taken those costs, and where they're not directly attributable to a particular municipality, we've reallocated the costs to all of the municipalities using a proportionate or a prorated service hour based calculation. And you can see the relative percentages on the right hand side on slide 25, and they are also included in your package, in the budget package. Those same percentages are highlighted there. That is how the $2 million is being split up. That then gets us to the discussion around the collective of the $25 million that is the overall cost to deliver services in 2023, net of revenues. And I will bring you back to some of the discussions that we've had in relation to the fact that the governance bylaw really prescribes very specifically how those costs are to be attributed, or how those costs are to be assigned in order to be able to fund the operations of the organization. The governance bylaw allows for those costs to be collected in two ways. One is a service-based cost allocation. So essentially taking costs and assigning them to each municipality for direct or indirect service costs, as well as the development of a base fee, which has been identified as a combination of both a fixed dollar amount and a variable per capita component. And that's how we've prepared the funding requests that we are recommending to you for requisitions to our municipalities. In the chart at the bottom of page 26, you can see how the totality is split amongst the various categories: the service-based cost allocation, the base fee, and the weighted cost allocation for debt repayment. As I said, the $12.7 million for regional costs and the $6.6 million, I said seven before, $6.6 million in local service costs is being allocated entirely on the basis of service-based cost allocations. The commission pool costs, estimated to be $4.6 million for 2023, are allocated in the budget draft that you see before you using the base fee approach, which is that combination of fixed dollar amount and a variable per capita component. The debt repayment is calculated a very different way, and I'll get to that in just a second. But I want to spend the next minute or so just highlighting the base fee calculation for the commission pooled costs. We've had a number of analyses done looking at different permutations and combinations, and looking at different ratios to be used for the annual fixed fee and the variable per capita fee. And at the end of the day, following the receipt of input from the board, we are proposing and using in this draft budget an overall annual fee, fixed fee for each municipality of $15,000, which results in a per capita cost of $3.72 per person, per population for each municipality. That is how we've apportioned or identified the distribution of the pooled costs of $4.675 million. And you can see in the very last column how that totals up for each municipality. And lastly, I will move to the debt servicing costs. In the original governance bylaw, there was an original estimated cost contribution calculation that identified percentages for the 2021 and 2022 debt, how that would be apportioned by the municipalities. It was approved in the original governance bylaw, and early in 2022, the board approved the continued reliance on that cost apportionment or cost original weighted cost allocation, approved the continued use of that for the 2022 operating budget startup period. So what we've done is we've simply taken the percentages that were in that governance bylaw, we've applied them to the overall debt, and we've used that 7-year debt retirement period, and resulting in a need for a 1.085 repayment, $1.085 million repayment in 2023, starting in 2023. And using those percentages, you can see how the varying contributions from each municipal member how that results, or what the result is, looking at that overall debt repayment amount, that 1-year debt repayment amount. We have now projected the repayment of $6.4 million in debt, and we've used a payback period of 84 months or 7 years, along with an estimated interest rate of 5%. That is how we calculated the various numbers that constitute the debt repayment totals for each municipality. Before I wrap up, I want to touch on the capital budget as well. In 2023, given where we are today, given some of the concerns that have been raised by some of the members, given some of the qualifications that in particular the city of Edmonton has included in some of the resolutions that have come forward from city council. At this point, we are not suggesting a transition of assets and a transition of people necessarily for 2023. As such, at this point in time, we are not including a capital budget for 2023. We have prepared the 24 and 25 outlooks without including capital, although we fully anticipate, in reflection of the work plan elements that the board approved, that as we go through an asset management planning approach, we will be adding a capital budget in future years to reflect changes, to reflect investments that will have to be made in the existing capital stock or in additional capital, in additional infrastructure and additional fleet as we move forward. But at this point in time for 2023, the proposed capital budget is zero. So finally, I will move to what are the most salient amounts for each municipality. The last slide here depicts the sum collective of the amounts that will be requisitioned, provided that the board approves this budget, will be requisitioned from each municipality for the delivery of regional, local service, for the repayment of debt, and for the pooled commission costs. What we've proposed is a two-stage requisition process for 2023. We are proposing a first stage or first requisition that would really be the sum total of 6 months of pooled commission costs for the requisition number 1. And that would go out on January 1st. In reflection of the fact that many of the municipalities will be going through their revenue collection processes, we are suggesting that the second requisition for the totality of the remainder of the year's costs would go out on March 1st of 2023. We've developed this table which summarizes the requisition amounts for each municipality that would have to be approved by the board. And at this point in time, that is the overall, they summarize to the overall amount of the 2023 costs. The last slides that I will highlight is just the 2024 and 2025 outlook. What we've done is we've taken the operating costs for 2023, and we've assumed at this point that the regional and local service levels will remain approximately the same, along with the pooled commission costs. As I said before, at this point, these do not include any kind of capital investment for 24 and 25. And because we're looking at a full year of operation starting in 2024, you can see that there is a substantial increase from 23, which has 8 months of operation, direct operation, versus 12 months of direct operation in 2024. But these are the numbers that we are working with at this point in time, realizing that as we go through gaining operating experience, we will likely be looking at some revisions for 24 and 25, reflecting the realities of service on the ground. But at this point in time, this is the outlook that we have prepared for the board. So in summary, this is the budget that delivers on the promise that was identified through all of that earlier work. This is the budget that starts operating for the benefit of the 8 member municipalities. This starts to create that overall integrated plan, that network that will be owned by all 8 municipalities, as represented by you, the representatives of those municipalities at this table. And with that, I will close, and both myself as the rest of the senior leadership team is happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Jankowski. It is indeed a big day for the commission. Councillor Finstad.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With respect to the debt repayment by municipality, is this the percentages that will be utilized going forward, or are they going to be adjusted based on population growth?
So I'll start, and I know that Kathleen, Kathleen Elhatton Lake is on here as well. These are the percentages that were applicable to the startup debt costs. Certainly in the future, as we start going through the modifications to the future budgets, we will be adjusting the base fee and the variable fee in reflection of the population increases. But given that it was identified that the weighted cost allocation in that governance bylaw would be used for the stand-up debt, we've looked at changing this in the future, and I really think this is going to be the applicable. These are going to be the applicable percentages for the total repayment of that stand-up cost.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarity. Appreciate that.
Okay, certainly the floor is open to questions. Any questions from our online board members? Councillor Gronberg, go ahead.
Thank you. Paul, I don't know if you spoke for about half an hour, but that was a very long presentation, but I think it just demonstrates the amount of work that has gone into this, and to summarize that in about, maybe it was about 30 minutes of months and months of work is quite commendable. So well done to all of the administration. And I also want to thank the board for negotiating and making adjustments to help Devon make it more palpable for my council to consider as well. My council is going to debate decisions on the next steps for this at our next budget meeting, which will be next weekend. So I'm just want to say, like, I'm really proud of where we are today. I really believe in regional collaboration, and I believe in the regional approaches. I think that this board, sitting on this board, has kind of restored that hope that communities from 8 different municipalities can come together and work together to create something really good that will benefit some of our more marginalized peoples. And so I don't really have a question, just more of a comment. And I just wanted to also maybe recommend that our chair put forward the motion for the budget, because I know you've done a lot of work on this too. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gronberg. Fine statements, to be sure. Thank you. Any other comments online? Okay, seeing none, I do have a question of you, Mr. Jankowski. I do know that part of our plan that was established as we put together the commission was to do a governance review within the first 2 years. I note that it's in the budget. Can you just maybe just give us a flyby as to when that is going to occur and the anticipated completion date?
Thank you. So yes, we are currently working on the terms of reference for that governance bylaw. We were originally hoping to meet the strict requirements of the governance review. We were hoping to meet the strict requirements of the governance bylaw that had the requirement for us to start the governance review by the end of 2022. And to conduct it over the ensuing 6-month period. We may be looking at a slight recommendation, slight deviation from that to be recommended to the board. I think given in particular the position of the city of Edmonton and the indication that the city will be considering its own budget and in particular the EMTSC requisition amount as part of that budget in December. I would suggest that it may be more prudent for us to just defer asking respondents out there in the industry to prepare proposals for carrying out that work after we know exactly where the city of Edmonton or how the city of Edmonton decision will impact this commission. Although we're doing that preparatory work, I truly believe that it might be more prudent for the board to consider granting or creating an appropriate extension to that timeline to minimize the amount of work that would be carried out by respondents.
Okay, fair enough. The dollar value to complete the work is within the budget and it's still anticipated to be completed in 23. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right, fair enough. Any other questions by any members? Councillor Houston.
Councillor Houston, I believe you're muted.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Paul, for recognizing everything I was saying. You had talked in your presentation, and I might have missed part of it at the end. I just wanted you to clarify. You had said that the two member municipalities, which are the county of Leduc and Parkland, would be sharing in pooled, having a proportionate share in the pooled cost. Can you just explain what that is, or just verify if that's the case?
No. Thank you for the question. So at this point, we are not envisioning that we would be asking for either of those counties, and we haven't included any kind of repayment of the pooled costs as part of the budget. What we have indicated, and certainly through earlier discussions with the board, we've suggested that for those agreements that might be in place prior to our start of operations, that they might be considered in a slightly different way, perhaps a grandfathering type of approach to those. So at this point in time, there isn't a an additional cost element to be applied to what are existing arrangements for delivery of services.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. And that clarifies it for me, because I had just missed part of that at the end and I didn't quite get that. But yeah, thank you for that. And yeah, I think that's always been the understanding, at least from our committee, at least anyway. Okay, my second question, we're recognizing that we're going to be developing a asset management framework and a capital assets plan, meaning that we're going to start looking at putting reserve funds in for capital assets. So I would imagine that to do that work, are we using a consultant, and are we going to be working in close consultation with our member municipalities for that work?
Yes, so thank you. I believe the answer to both of those, the quick answer is yes. Certainly entering into or developing an appropriate asset management framework, we will need professional services to assist us in that regard. And given that we're at this point not anticipating to transition existing assets into this organization, we would be working directly with our member municipalities who have ownership of those assets as we go through this.
Yeah, thank you. And I think to further add to that clarity, Paul, is I think the City of Edmonton's decision following, their budget and stuff this year, there might be some further review that would be required in 2023 and that. So there will be, still a little bit, I would say, positive to that, but there's still a little bit of uncertainty as to what would happen with their, phase 2 and everything else. But anyway, thank you. That clarifies it, Paul. That's all I had. Questions?
Thank you very much, Councillor Houston. Any other questions of the board? Well, seeing none. Go ahead, Councillor Finstad.
Sorry, just Just a question with regard to the motion. There's actually 3 motions in there, and I would recommend that we address each one individually as opposed to doing them as a group. What would your thoughts on the way they're presented?
Well, if you would propose that we sever the 3 and address each one individually, that's certainly your right as a board member to indicate that.
I just think it might be easier than lumping them all together because they are actually separate motions.
Okay, fair enough. Then we'll sever the 3 and we'll entertain the motions as 1, 2, and 3, and we'll vote separately in that regard. Now, is there any comment on that by board members? Well, seeing none, this is fairly normal activity of boards, so I certainly don't have any problem with that. And Councillor Gromberg, I know that you suggested I move the motion. I would have no problem doing that. Of course, I have to give up the chair in order to do that. So I ask you, Mr. Vice Chair, would you care to take the chair?
I certainly shall. I certainly shall take the chair, and looking for the motion number 1.
Okay. Well, I move that the proposed 2023 operating and capital budget and the 2024-2025 outlook as presented, the budget be moved by this board and approved.
All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand, and those online, please use the online function. That motion is carried unanimously. Would you care to read motion number 2?
I would, sir. I move that the levies payable by each member be approved as presented as reflected in the proposed 2023 operating and capital budget, including the timing of the requisition to be issued.
Have a motion before us. Any discussion?
I would like to speak to this one, and certainly it is quite honestly a momentous day in the life of the commission, where we're actually approving an operating and capital budget for 8 municipalities. We're actually moving from a conceptual organization that's been stood up, to be sure, by the province, but now we're transitioning into actually an organization that is in action. And part of being a commission, if you will, is that we levy the requirements to provide the services of the commission to the member municipalities. And this is a big deal because we're asking the taxpayers in each one of our municipalities support our organization in the work that we're doing, to their benefit, to be sure. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. But nonetheless, we are attempting to provide seamless public transit throughout the region, and all 8 of us own this transit agency. And so it's pretty exciting, quite honestly, and it's my privilege to bring this motion forward.
Thank you for that. And just to kind of echo part of your comments, was the MOU was probably signed about 6+ years ago. And to come from that signing of the MOU to where we are today is indeed a momentous occasion. And I'm very pleased that you're able to make the motions before us.
Thank you very much, sir.
Are there any further comments? Councillor Houston.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, and to Mr. Broadhead. Wes, thank you very much for your leadership and all the work you've done in this. I think you've been on this thing since day 1. I haven't been, but I know the amount of complex work that's gone on behind the scenes. But thanks for the opportunity to share a few comments. But I want to say I think this is a really good news story. And Paul talked about it in his presentation, that it's really a pivot from the original business case. But and the opening day approach is certainly different, but it's a new feasible integrated metro transit service that we're getting ready to launch, and the approval of this budget and stuff that we've worked hard on, and our commission has worked hard on to get to that is a key component of what we're trying to do in the Edmonton metro region. I just wanted to remind everybody, and I wanted to thank the city of Edmonton, particularly Don Iveson, who took the Be Ready or Be Left Behind report, turned it into a vision for him to see interconnected transit service in the metro region for economic development and getting people around. So Edmonton really invited us to the table. So it's a big feather in the cap for Edmonton to try to pull their member municipalities together. And so that's why I'm optimistic that their phase one approach is going to get approved. I'm not 100% sure, of course, there's lots of discussion, but I think, with their invitation, inviting us to the table, I think it's, a little bit on them to, follow through with the work that we've done. And I know there's going to be another review on the business case on phase two, and there's some time to do that. But anyway, good job with everybody, and it's tough slugging. My final note is to pull 8 member municipalities together and 2 non-members as well is incredibly complex work. And I must say it's been a lot of heavy lifting by everybody and super supportive of the motion by our chair. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Are any further comments? Seeing none, we have the second motion before us. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hands. And that motion is carried unanimously. Mr. Chair, would you like to read the third motion?
I would. The interest payable, I move that the interest payable on the late payment of levies be set at 7.5% of the amount of the levy payable by the member.
We have a motion before us. Is there any discussion?
I suspect this is a formal activity. You have to set a interest rate for any unpaid. I don't anticipate that any of our members will have to incur this cost, but nonetheless, there it is.
And I think the reason it was brought up was there have been instances where municipalities in the past, based on other circumstances, have tried to play the silly games of withholding payments, thinking there would be no repercussions. So I'm glad to see that the administration brought this motion forward for our consideration.
If I may, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, there's actually a requirement in your governance bylaw that the board do approve this on an annual basis. So it's a fiduciary responsibility as well for you to approve this.
Appreciate the clarification. We have a motion before us. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. And that motion is carried unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for your reading of those motions. It's greatly appreciated. And thank you, Councillor Gronberg, for making that recommendation that it be handled in that manner.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, for allowing me to do that. Appreciate it. And for your comment, Ben, that was great. Thank you. We now are moving into the next portion of our meeting, and it is in camera. And I'll ask that someone make this motion in public before we actually sign off. Councillor Harris, would you care to make this motion for us?
I'm pleased to move that the board move in camera in accordance, excuse me, with the provisions of Division 2, exceptions to disclosure of the Freedom of Information Protection of Privacy Act, RSA 2000, Chapter F-25, as per Section 16 through 28.
Thank you very much, sir. All in favor, please raise your hands. And that is carried unanimously. Thank you very much, Councillor Harris. Let's take 5 minutes, shall we? Reconvene at 4:25. Thanks. Yeah, no, that was really good. Agreement development?
Yeah.
Okay, so the record of our discussion of in camera was service transition agreement development and interim staffing strategy. Now, Councillor Gronberg, can I get you to do the next one too?
Sure. I would move that the board accept as information the materials and discussions as presented in camera.
Okay, do you want to say anything in support of this one?
Not really. I think we had a good discussion and yeah, glad we had it.
Very good. All in favor, please raise your hands. I got 4 in person and 3 online. That's passed unanimously. And just for everybody's information, I did get a text from Councillor Monkoff Swain, and the People's Airline, or whichever airline he was on, was screwing with his schedule, and so he had to chime off. So he's not on board, but he did stick around until we got to about the middle of the discussion in camera. So, and he was part of our discussion at the HR committee anyway. All right, so Councillor Harris, as chair of the HR and Compensation Committee, you want to make this motion?
I'm pleased to. I would move that the board approve the EMTSC staff proceeding with engagement and consultation with member municipalities to develop the service transition agreements, including I would add in, including the appropriate staffing strategy elements. So
Okay.
I just add a word to this wording that's on the screen right now.
All right, and we'll get that up there. So including the appropriate staffing strategy elements.
And speaking in favor of that, obviously, as we are developing this new entity, we have had to pivot and move and be nimble and flexible in relation to the things that as a board and for all of the staff that support the board in its endeavor to build this organization. The next step is to ultimately talk to our member municipalities about elements that were included in the original business case, but of which we've had to have considered some changes. And so I think it's an appropriate and prudent step to move forward to have the discussions as it relates to the staffing as we move forward, because there are some staff in the various member municipalities that were contemplated to become part of our entity at some point in time. But we've got a bit of an adjustment to that. So having those conversations with the member municipalities, with the CAO and their respective administrative management teams is prudent at this time. And ultimately that sets the ground for the overall service transition, which impacts some other things too. So we'll start those conversations. And I think the board is prudent in its efforts to do this thing in an appropriate timeline.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Well stated. Anyone else want to weigh in on debate? Councillor Houston?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and to Gord for the motion. Certainly supportive of it. I think the point that Gord made is that we did a lot of things to get to where we are today, and those approvals that we did earlier, there's a lot of heavy lifting, and really proud of the pulling together all the member municipalities. And we get to the next stage where the next step in the process is the development of the service transition agreements, including the appropriate staffing strategy elements. And just in speaking to the staffing, I think it's great because there's, a lot of these are people lives and where they're working. And, we have to take that cautious approach on how that's handled, knowing that we're certainly supportive of their current positions in that. So thank you very much, Councillor Harris. I'll be supporting this motion.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other on debate? Seeing none, Councillor Harris, anything to close?
Well, just so that we all understand that the final development of the service transition agreements, including staffing elements, is a bit of a journey. And that we're giving direction to staff to start that journey. And ultimately, in consideration of a number of conversations they're going to have with administrative staff and senior management in the municipalities, that it'll be a dialogue, I suspect. And that the board will be seeing these things as they come back, and will be receiving that information and updates from administration as we proceed, is what I would anticipate. So that's my comments to close.
Thank you very much, Councillor. All in favor, please indicate by raising your hand. I got 4 in chambers and I got 3 online. That's passed unanimously. Thank you very much. Mr. Jankowski, anything before we consider the motion to adjourn?
The only thing I will say is that I just want to express my appreciation to the board for all the hard work that getting us through the last number of months and getting us to this monumental occasion of having that budget approved for 2023. Thank you very much for all your guidance, your assistance, and your patience in getting us here. It's been a lot of work, and thank you again to all of our staff.
The kudos are to your team, quite honestly. And I know that each one of us have had a bit of a journey in our respective municipalities. But one day at a time, we'll get this done. All right, so I want you to note that it's 20 after 5. This is 10 minutes early today, just in case anybody is noting that. All right, so online,